The world ended, not with a bang, but with a guttural roar that vibrated through the very bedrock beneath my feet. I was pinned, the rusted I-beam digging into my ribs, the metallic tang of old blood already filling my mouth. Above me, the gaping maw of what used to be a shopping mall yawned like a broken jaw, its concrete teeth shattered, its glass eyes long gone. And from its depths, something lumbered, something huge. The sound of its footsteps was less a thud and more a tremor, like the earth itself was clearing its throat. Dust, thick and gray, rained down from the shattered ceilings of the collapsed parking garage where I'd made my last desperate stand. My right leg, twisted at an unnatural angle beneath a chunk of fallen rebar, screamed with a pain so intense it almost drowned out the approaching horror. Almost. I could feel its presence even before I saw it, a suffocating aura of decay and immense unnatural power. My breath hitched, a thin, pathetic gasp in the otherwise still air. My fingers, slick with sweat and grime, scrabbled for the pistol on my belt, but it was just out of reach, caught beneath the rubble. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. This wasn't just another horde. This was them. The whispers of legends, the nightmarish evolution that had swept across what remained of our doomed world, proven once and for all that when giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed. And I, Alex, former urban explorer, current terrified survivor, was about to become proof of that grim truth. The shadow it cast grew, blotting out the sliver of polluted sunlight that had been my only companion for the last agonizing hour. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate for escape. What would it look like? How could anything be this big? The only thing I knew for sure was that it was coming for me, and I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. The first wave, the Shamblers, they were almost quaint in retrospect. The original infected, slow, mindless, easily outmaneuvered if you were smart, quick, and had a decent enough weapon. They were the ones who turned cities into graveyards overnight. But even then, there was a primal, desperate hope. We built walls, we scavenged, we dreamed of a cure. We were so stupid. I remember the day it all started. I was holed up in an abandoned library, documenting the beauty of urban decay with my old DSLR. The silence had been profound, broken only by the click of my shutter and the distant muffled sirens of a world blissfully unaware of its impending doom. I was just editing a shot of sunlight filtering through broken stained glass when my phone, miraculously, buzzed with an emergency alert. Not the usual weather warning. This was different. A nationwide broadcast override. A stern, trembling voice. Stay indoors. Lock your doors. Do not engage with anyone displaying aggressive or disoriented behavior. Seek immediate shelter. Then nothing, just static. My first thought was a terrorist attack. My second, as I crept to the broken window overlooking Main Street, was a nightmare. Below, people were running, not in an organized panic, but a chaotic, desperate scramble. And amongst them, others stumbled, fell and rose again, lurching with an unnatural hunger. One woman, her face streaked with blood, tore into the throat of a fallen pedestrian. Her scream was not of pain, but of satisfaction. A low, wet, tearing sound filled the air, and my gut twisted. This wasn't a terrorist attack. This was something far, far worse. I stayed in that library for a week, subsisting on stale granola bars from my pack and rainwater collected in empty coffee cups. The silence outside was punctuated by screams, gunshots, and then, slowly, a pervasive, chilling moan that echoed through the empty streets. My camera, once a tool for capturing forgotten beauty, became a record of the apocalypse. Each day, the city outside grew stiller, the sounds of life replaced by the endless shuffle and groan of the infected. My hope dwindled with my rations, replaced by a growing dread. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the old world was gone. I was alone. Or so I thought. My first encounter with a runner was a rude awakening. I'd run out of food and water, desperate enough to risk scavenging a corner store. The streets were eerily quiet that morning, the sun casting long, twisted shadows. I moved like a ghost, hugging the shadows, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I'd found a few cans of beans, a bottle of lukewarm water, a small victory in a world stripped of them. That's when I heard it, a guttural shriek, impossibly fast, impossibly close. I barely had time to react. It wasn't shambling, it was sprinting, a blur of ragged clothes and rotting flesh. Its eyes, wide and bloodshot, fixed on me with a terrifying intelligence. This wasn't the slow, stupid infected I'd seen from my library window. This thing was lean, feral, and fast as hell. I dropped my meager supplies, adrenaline surging. My combat knife, a gift from my old man, was in my hand in a flash. It shrieked again, a sound that tore at the fabric of sanity, and lunged. I ducked under its outstretched arm, the reek of its breath, a nauseating cocktail of decay and something metallic, burning my nostrils. I felt its ragged fingernails scrape my jacket, a chill running down my spine. My knife found its mark, deep into its chest, but it barely flinched. These things were tougher, more resilient. I scrambled backward, a primal fear seizing me. Its speed was its advantage, but its momentum was its weakness. It stumbled, giving me a precious second. I didn't hesitate. Aiming for the head, as the whispered survival guides now universally instructed, I plunged the knife deep into its temple. It spasmed, a sickening gurgle escaping its throat, and finally dropped, twitching for a few agonizing seconds before going still. I stood over it, gasping for breath, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped the knife. That was close, too close. The virus was changing, adapting. It was a terrifying realization. If these things were getting faster, stronger, what else could they do? What else could they become? I scavenged what I could, my precious beans forgotten in the street. The experience left an indelible mark. My urban exploration skills, my photographer's eye for detail, my prepper's mindset, they all coalesced into one singular, desperate goal: survival. I learned to move silently, to blend with the shadows, to recognize the subtle differences in their groans, their movements. I learned to kill without hesitation, to make impossible choices. I learned that every day was a gift, a borrowed moment in a world that wanted you dead. And every survivor I met, every brief, fragile connection, only hammered home the terrifying truth. We were on borrowed time. When giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed. And they were already evolving. The first whispers of something bigger started filtering through the sparse survivor networks. Garbled radio transmissions, desperate shouts from high-rise lookouts. Massive infected sighted, unstoppable, moves mountains of rubble. We dismissed them as exaggerated fear, adrenaline-fueled delusions. No one wanted to believe it, not yet. I was part of a small group then, maybe 6 of us, holed up in an old university dormitory. Sarah, a former medical student who patched us up. Mike, an ex-con with a surprising knack for mechanics and a heart of gold. And the twins, Liam and Chloe, barely teenagers, hardened beyond their years, but still clinging to fragments of childhood innocence. We had a good setup. Solar panels, a hydroponic garden, even a small library where Sarah tried to teach the kids what the world had lost. We dared to dream of rebuilding, of finding a safe haven. We were stupid again. It started subtly. Earthquakes, we thought. Distant rumbling that shook the foundations of our dormitory, rattling the glass in the few remaining windows. Then the power outages, not from grid failure, but from something physically collapsing major infrastructure in the distance. And the screams, not the usual desperate shouts, but prolonged, agonizing wails that carried for miles, punctuated by the unmistakable sound of concrete grinding to dust. Mike was on watch one evening, his breath clouding in the cold night air. The dormitory overlooked what used to be a bustling downtown, now a skeletal ruin. He swore he saw something move in the haze, something too large to be a building, too fluid to be a collapsing crane. He dismissed it as smoke and shadows, but his hand kept going to his rifle. His unease was palpable. We all felt it. The air was thick with it. The next morning, it was confirmed. A distant, once iconic skyscraper, its top floors still visible through the perpetual smog, was gone. Not collapsed, but ripped down. Twisted rebar, shattered glass, pulverized concrete lay in a vast radius. And etched into the rubble, unmistakable, were colossal gouges. Claw marks, too big for any known animal, too big for any human. The horror of it clamped down on us. This wasn't just the virus evolving. This was a whole new level of terror. This was an existential threat. This was the moment we truly understood what it meant when giant zombies evolve. And it was happening right outside our sanctuary. "We need to move," I said, my voice flat, hollow. "Now." Sarah nodded, her face pale. "But where? Where can you go to escape something like that?" "Away from the cities," I replied. "Away from the major population centers. They're attracted to the big ones, to the sources of energy, the denser clusters." I pulled out a tattered map, tracing a route through the desolate countryside. Liam and Chloe huddled together, their eyes wide with uncomprehending fear. They didn't understand the scale of what we were facing. I almost envied them their ignorance. Our escape was a blur of terror and frantic movement. We packed what we could, meager supplies for a journey into the unknown. The rumbling returned, closer this time, accompanied by a chorus of distant, frenzied shrieks from the ordinary infected. They were agitated, drawn by the presence of something even they feared. We had to move fast. We took the university service tunnels, a labyrinthine network that snaked beneath the campus. Dark, damp, filled with the stench of mildew and forgotten garbage. It felt like walking through the veins of a dying leviathan. Sarah led the way, her small flashlight beam dancing nervously. Mike brought up the rear, his rifle ready. The twins were between us, holding hands, their faces streaked with grime and fear. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every drip of water echoed like a gunshot. Then we heard it. Not the distant rumble this time, but a distinct, heavy scrape. And a wet, tearing sound, like tearing cloth, but infinitely larger, infinitely more horrifying. It came from above us. The tunnel ceiling groaned, a fine powder of concrete dust raining down. "Keep moving," I hissed, pushing Liam forward. "Faster!" The scrape came again, followed by a deeper, guttural groan that made the very air vibrate. It was directly above us, too close. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. What was it doing? Was it aware of us? Could it smell us? A section of the tunnel ceiling directly ahead exploded inwards. Not collapsed, but punctured. A massive clawed hand, mottled gray and green with decay, as big as a car door, punched through the concrete, showering us with debris. The air filled with the horrific stench of its flesh, a pungent, sickening odor that burned my eyes and throat. It flexed its fingers, tearing another chunk of concrete away, widening the hole. And through the growing aperture, I saw it. A single, colossal eye, milky white and utterly dead, staring down into the darkness. This wasn't just big, this was monstrous. Its skin was a patchwork of grotesque scar tissue and weeping sores, fused with what looked like chunks of metal and rebar. Its jaw hung slack, revealing rows of teeth like broken gravestones, each one easily the size of my fist. The sheer scale of it was paralyzing. This was no mere evolution. This was a goddamn nightmare made manifest. This was what happened when the virus didn't just infect, but transformed. "Run! Move! Get out!" Mike screamed, pushing the twins. Sarah stumbled, catching herself, her face a mask of abject terror. I grabbed her, dragging her forward. The giant hand was retracting, but not to leave, to push itself through. It was trying to get into the tunnel. We scrambled, adrenaline lending us impossible speed. The groan intensified, closer, more desperate now. The tunnel was too small for it, but it was trying to force its way in. Concrete splintered, metal shrieked. It was like the world itself was being ripped apart above us. We burst out of the tunnel into a forgotten maintenance yard, blinded by the sudden sunlight. But there was no time to savor the open air. The sound of destruction behind us was deafening. "Vehicle!" I yelled, spotting an old university pickup truck, miraculously intact. Mike was already on it, fumbling with the lock. The twins were frozen, staring back at the tunnel entrance, which was now erupting with concrete and dust. A massive, grotesque head, dripping black fluid, was trying to squeeze through, its dead eye sweeping the yard. "Julie, Liam, move! Get in the truck!" Sarah screamed, yanking them toward the vehicle. I covered them, my rifle up.
But what could a few bullets do against something that size? It was futile. A child's toy gun against a leviathan. Mike got the door open. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. A miracle. The giant infected let out another roar, a sound of frustrated rage and hunger. It was almost through the tunnel.
Its massive shoulder had scraped away half the entrance. Its other hand was tearing at the ground, pulling itself forward. Its sheer mass made the very earth tremble. "Go! Go, Mike! Go!" I yelled, piling into the back of the pickup just as Mike floored it. The tires spun, spraying gravel, and we lurched forward. The monster roared again, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. We caught a glimpse of it in the rearview mirror, a monumental figure, slowly, inexorably, pulling itself free from the tunnel, leaving a ruined landscape in its wake. Its immense, malformed body, composed of what looked like multiple fused infected, moved with a sickening, unnatural fluidity. This wasn't just a giant zombie. This was an evolutionary leap. These things weren't just bigger. They were stronger, tougher, and utterly, terrifyingly relentless. And they proved without a shadow of a doubt that when giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed. We sped away, the screams of the city fading behind us, replaced by the thrum of the engine and the terrified silence of my companions. We had escaped, but the image of that monster was burned into my mind, a chilling harbinger of what lay ahead. The open road was a graveyard of twisted metal and forgotten dreams. Mile after mile, we passed abandoned cars, some scorched, others simply left in place, doors ajar, a silent testament to the speed and chaos of the collapse. The sun beat down, baking the asphalt, making the air shimmer. The smell of decay was omnipresent, carried on the wind, a constant reminder of the pervasive horror that had consumed the world. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, occasionally glancing back at the twins huddled in the bed of the truck, their faces drawn and pale. Mike drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his gaze flicking from the road to the desolate fields beyond. I sat in the back, rifle across my lap, watching our back trail, every shadow, every distant movement making my pulse quicken. We hadn't spoken much since our escape. What was there to say? We'd faced the impossible, and for now we had survived. But the cost was immense. The silence was broken only by the engine's drone and the occasional sniffle from Chloe. Liam, ever the protective older brother, had an arm around her, staring blankly at the ruined landscape. Mine, however, was a whirlwind of frantic thoughts. That thing, what was it? How did it get that big? Was it a mutation? A fusion of multiple infected? The implications were terrifying. If one could exist, how many more? How many types? "Alex," Sarah's voice was quiet, hesitant. "What did you see? Up close?" I exhaled slowly, the stale air scratching my throat. It was indescribable. Not just big, it looked like it was made of other infected, or like it had absorbed them, fused with debris. Its skin was like rock, but it moved. It was trying to talk itself through the tunnel. It was smart. Mike swore softly. Smart? You mean it's not just mindless hunger? I don't know, I admitted. But it knew we were there. It was trying to reach us. And the way it was tearing the tunnel apart, It knew what it was doing. The implications were a punch to the gut. An intelligent giant zombie. A hunter, not just a shambler. That meant strategy. That meant traps. That meant we were no longer just running from a mindless force of nature. We were running from an apex predator, a truly evolved horror. We drove for hours, leaving the city far behind, the distant black plumes of smoke from burning buildings fading into the horizon. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple, a morbidly beautiful farewell to the day. We needed shelter for the night. The thought of sleeping under the open sky, exposed, vulnerable, was unbearable. Mike spotted it first, a dilapidated farm, a few miles off the main road, nestled amongst overgrown fields. A two-story farmhouse, a barn, a silo. It looked abandoned, untouched by the chaos of the cities. A beacon of false hope in a sea of despair. "Worth a look?" he asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I nodded. "Better than nothing. Drive slow. Keep an eye out." The dirt road leading to the farm was choked with weeds, the fence line long collapsed. The air here was cleaner, fresher, mingled with the faint sweet scent of decaying vegetation. A welcome change from the city's putrid breath. As we approached the farmhouse, a wave of caution washed over me. Too quiet, too perfect. My urban explorer instincts, honed by years of navigating forgotten spaces, screamed warning. We approached on foot, weapons ready, moving with a practiced silence born of constant threat. The farmhouse was old, its paint peeling, windows broken, but structurally sound. The front door hung ajar, a dark maw inviting us in. My hand tightened on my rifle. "Sarah, stay with the kids. Mike, you're with me." We crept inside, clearing room by room. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through the grimy windows. The house smelled of stale air, damp wood, and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. Every floorboard creaked, every rustle of wind outside made us jump. The living room was cluttered with overturned furniture, a testament to a hasty evacuation. A half-eaten meal sat fossilized on the dining table, plates covered in a thick layer of dust. Life had simply stopped here. Upstairs, the bedrooms were equally disturbed. In one, a child's teddy bear lay on the floor, its glass eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A chill ran down my spine. The personal touches, the echoes of lives abruptly ended, always hit the hardest. "Clear," Mike whispered, returning from the last room. "Looks empty. Nothing alive, nothing dead." Relief washed over me, brief and fleeting. "Good. Let's get Sarah and the kids in. We'll barricade the downstairs, set up watch." As we descended the stairs, a faint sound reached my ears. A low, rhythmic thump. It came from the barn. I froze, holding up a hand. Mike immediately went silent, rifle raised. The thump came again, heavier this time. Then a scrape. "Barn," I mouthed. Mike nodded, his expression grim. "Stay here," I whispered to him. "I'll check it out. Get Sarah and the kids settled. Barricade the doors." I didn't wait for a response, already moving silently towards the back door. Something felt wrong. This wasn't the sound of an ordinary infected. This was too heavy, too deliberate. The barn doors, weathered and rotten, were partially open, held by a single rusty latch. The smell of old hay and manure mingled with that metallic scent I'd noticed earlier. I pushed the door open just enough to slip through,
my rifle ready, safety off. The interior was a cavern of shadows, crisscrossed with dusty beams of light. Old farming equipment lay abandoned, rusting. Hay bales were stacked high, creating dark nooks and crannies. The thumping sound was louder now, coming from the back, near the silo. I moved slowly, silently, each step agonizingly deliberate. My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate drum. As I rounded a stack of hay, I saw it. Not an infected, not a shambler, not even a runner. This was a brute. It was easily 9 feet tall, its frame grotesquely muscled, flesh stretched taut and gray over immense bones. Its head was small in comparison to its body, buried in a thick neck, but its jaws were distended, constantly working, showing jagged, yellowed teeth. One arm was thicker than the other, ending in a massive club-like fist. It was methodically, powerfully, smashing a tractor to pieces, ripping away chunks of metal with terrifying ease. Each thump was the sound of its fist connecting with steel. Its eyes, small and sunken, darted around, constantly scanning, almost thinking. It didn't see me. Not yet. I backed away slowly, my breath held. The sheer power of it was mesmerizing, horrifying. This was another step in their evolution. A creature of immense destructive force, utterly single-minded in its purpose. The thought that when giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed flashed through my mind with renewed, chilling clarity. How many more types were there? What else were they becoming?
My foot crunched on a stray piece of gravel. The brute froze. Its small head snapped up. Its dead eyes, tiny pinpricks of malice in its massive face, fixed on me. It let out a low, guttural growl, a sound like grinding stone. It dropped the twisted remains of the tractor. Its attention, its hunger, was now entirely on me, and I was alone. The brute charged. It wasn't fast like a runner, but its momentum was terrifying. Each step shook the barn floor, sending vibrations through the very soles of my boots. I didn't hesitate. I pumped around into my rifle chamber and fired, aiming for the head. The bullet struck its forehead with a sickening thud, but it barely flinched. The impact cratered its thick skull, a spray of dark fluid erupting, but it kept coming. Its dead eyes, though, were now fixed with a terrifying singular rage. I fired again and again, emptying half a magazine into its face and chest. The bullets seemed to sink into its dense, leathery flesh, doing little more than slow it down, anger it further. It was like shooting a concrete wall. This wasn't a normal infected. This was a walking tank. I turned and ran, scrambling over fallen tools, kicking aside hay bales. My mind raced, searching for an escape, a weakness, anything. The barn was a death trap. I heard it behind me, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground, the low growl a constant, terrifying companion. It swiped at me as I passed a stack of crates, its massive clawed hand tearing through wood with effortless force, just missing my head. I burst out of the barn door, gasping for breath, my lungs burning. The setting sun cast long, ominous shadows. Mike, rifle up, was already at the farmhouse door, eyes wide with horror. Sarah was behind him, clutching the twins. "Run! Get in the truck! Go!"
I screamed, turning to face the monster that was now filling the barn entrance. Mike hesitated, a flicker of loyalty in his eyes. "Alex, no! Go, I'll draw it off. Get them to safety." My voice was hoarse, desperate. I knew this was a suicide mission, but the kids, Sarah, they deserved a chance. The brute lumbered out of the barn, its grotesque form silhouetted against the dying light. It let out a guttural roar, a sound of raw power and unthinking fury. It wasn't distracted. It was focused on me. I sprinted, veering away from the farmhouse, drawing its attention. My rifle was nearly empty, useless against this behemoth. I needed something bigger, something with more stopping power. But what? My eyes darted around the farmyard. The silo. It was metal, tall, maybe. Nah, too exposed. Then I saw it. An old, rusted tractor, much smaller than the one the brute was dismantling, but still a heavy piece of machinery. My mind, trained in urban exploration, immediately saw the potential.
A choke point, a trap. I dodged another swipe, feeling the wind of its massive fist as it tore through the air where I'd been a second before. The sheer force of its attacks was enough to send shivers down my spine. This thing didn't just kill, it annihilated. I scrambled onto the tractor, fumbling with the ignition. No key, of course not. It was just a broken shell. But it was heavy. Maybe I could knock it over? Use it as a barrier? A desperate thought, but it was all I had. The brute was closing in, its immense shadow falling over me. I could smell its putrid breath, feel the ground tremble beneath its feet. I emptied the remaining bullets from my rifle into its head, more out of defiance than actual hope. They impacted with dull thuds, doing nothing. The monster roared again, raising its colossal fist. This was it, the end. Then a shot rang out, loud, clear, from the farmhouse. The brute stumbled, a fresh wound appearing on its arm, spraying black fluid. Mike, he had stayed. He was covering me. "Get off the tractor, Alex! Get clear!" he yelled, firing another shot. The brute ignored Mike for a second, turning its dead eyes toward the farmhouse, then back to me. It made a low, frustrated growl. It was a choice. Mike was a nuisance. I was within reach. Its hunger for me outweighed its anger at him. I jumped off the tractor, yelling at Mike to run. But he was reloading, frantically trying to buy me more time. I saw Sarah, pale and terrified, pulling the twins into the truck, screaming at Mike to get in. I spotted an old, rusty crowbar, half buried in the dirt near the barn. A desperate, foolish idea sparked in my mind. No way. But what choice did I have? I sprinted for it, grabbing the cold, rough metal. The brute was almost on me. I did the only thing I could think of. I feigned a move to the left, then spun right, using the tractor as cover. The brute, massive and slow to turn, slammed into the old machine, twisting it, sending sparks flying. For a brief second, it was off balance. That was all I needed. My years of climbing, of knowing how to find purchase, how to use leverage, kicked in. I scrambled up the side of the brute's leg, the crowbar clutched in my hand. Its flesh was like tough, rotten leather, but it was solid. It roared in surprise, trying to shake me off, but I held on, digging my fingers into the crevices of its flesh, climbing like a spider on a grotesque wall. I knew its weakness, the brain, but the skull was like a concrete bunker. I needed to get to its neck,
its spine. A gamble, a desperate, insane gamble. The monster thrashed, its arm flailing wildly, trying to grab me. I felt the wind of its fingers brush my side. One misstep, one slip, and I was pulp.
I reached its neck, clinging to a particularly gnarled piece of its flesh. It was thick, corded, a mass of bone and muscle. But there, at the base of its skull, where the spinal cord connected, a vulnerability, a slight indentation, a place where the immense bone wasn't as thick. It was probably a fusion point, a weakness from its grotesque evolution. With a roar of pure, desperate adrenaline, I plunged the crowbar into that soft spot. It sank deep, severing something vital. The brute let out a deafening shriek, a sound of agony and pure, undiluted rage that echoed across the desolate fields. Its body spasmed, thrashing violently. I held on for dear life, feeling my grip slip. It fell, a colossal shuddering crash that shook the very ground. I was thrown clear, landing hard in the dirt, the crowbar still in my hand. Dust, debris, and the foul stench of its blood filled the air. I lay there, gasping, every inch of my body screaming in protest. The brute twitched, its legs kicking weakly for a few more seconds. Then it went still. Utterly, irrevocably still. Silence. A profound, ringing silence, broken only by my ragged breathing and the frantic thrum of the truck engine. Mike, Sarah, and the twins were staring at me, their faces a mix of horror and disbelief. I had done it. I had killed it. But at what cost? My body ached, my head swam, and the image of its dead eye, its immense power, was seared into my mind. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was just the beginning. The virus was adapting. It was creating new horrors. And humanity, armed with rifles and crowbars, was ill-equipped to face them. When giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed. I had just seen a stark, terrifying example of that truth, and barely lived to tell the tale. My body protested every movement. Bruises bloomed across my ribs, my shoulder throbbed, and a deep gash on my forearm, where I'd scraped against the brute's coarse hide, stung with a fiery intensity. But I was alive. We were all alive. We piled into the truck, the setting sun painting the sky in morbid hues, and left the farm behind. Mike drove, his hand still trembling slightly on the wheel. Sarah, in the passenger seat, kept looking back at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. The twins were silent, still traumatized. "Are you hurt badly?" Sarah finally asked, her voice soft. I shook my head, though it was a lie. Nothing I haven't survived before. Another lie. I'd never faced anything like that. You saved us, Alex," Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. I thought you were gone." I managed a weak smile. Not yet. But inside, a cold, hard truth had settled. The brute was just one type. What else lurked out there? What other nightmares were brewing in the infected masses? What new horrors would giant zombies evolve into next? The thought was a constant, gnawing dread. We drove through the night, the highway a black ribbon stretching into an uncertain future. The moon, a pale sickle in the inky sky, cast ghostly shadows. I couldn't sleep. Every bump in the road, every rustle of wind sent my heart racing. My mind replayed the encounter with the brute, its strength, its resilience, its apparent focus, the subtle shifts in their behavior, the increasing variation in their forms. It was all pointing to a terrifying conclusion. The virus wasn't just a disease. It was an active, evolving intelligence, testing the limits of biological transformation, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Sarah, despite her exhaustion, tended to my wounds with a field dressing from her medical kit. Her touch was gentle, her face etched with concern. "That gash, it's deep. We need to find something to stitch it up properly soon. Get it cleaned." "It'll be fine," I mumbled, more to reassure her than myself. My arm was numb, throbbing. The scraping against the brute's body had left behind a nasty residue, a mix of grime and something else, something I didn't want to think about. The landscape grew more desolate as we headed further west, away from the dense population centers. Fields stretched endlessly, broken by skeletal trees, silent testament to a world gone wrong. We finally pulled off the highway at dawn, seeking shelter in a small abandoned roadside diner. The sun rose, painting the horizon in a sickly yellow, a color that did little to lift my spirits. The diner was surprisingly intact. Cracked windows, a thick layer of dust, but the booths were still there, the counter still gleaming faintly. It offered a fleeting illusion of normalcy, a ghost of a time when people gathered for coffee and conversation. We scavenged the kitchen, finding a few cans of stale soup, some packaged crackers, luxury in this new world. While the others ate in hushed silence, I found myself staring out the window at the empty highway. My mind drifted back to the library, to the simple joy of capturing light and shadow. That life felt a million years away. The beauty I once sought had been replaced by a grotesque artistry of decay and destruction. I wondered if I would ever see beauty again, if any of us would. "What do we do now, Alex?" Liam's voice was barely a whisper. He and Chloe sat huddled together in a booth, sharing a can of peaches Mike had found. I turned, meeting his gaze. His eyes, still so young, held an old man's weariness. "We keep moving. We find a place to dig in, to set up a long-term camp.
Somewhere remote, defensible."
"And the big ones?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. I exhaled slowly. "We learn, we adapt, we find new ways to fight them, or to avoid them." I didn't have a better answer. I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I didn't know if we could fight them, not these new abominations. The brute was a stark reminder of our fragility, our utter insignificance in the face of their monstrous evolution. Days bled into weeks. We became nomads, drifting through the desolate landscape, always moving, always searching for a safe haven that didn't exist. We learned to survive on scavenged scraps, to sleep with one eye open, to trust only each other. The bond between us grew stronger, forged in the crucible of shared terror and desperate hope. Sarah became our medic, our moral compass. Mike, our driver and protector, his rough exterior slowly cracking to reveal a deep-seated kindness.
The twins, Liam and Chloe, found strength in each other, their resilience a constant source of wonder. And I became their reluctant leader, their planner, their killer, the one who made the impossible choices. We had other close calls, encounters with larger hordes of runners, desperate survivors who turned out to be raiders, packs of feral dogs. Each encounter sharpened our senses, hardened our hearts, and chipped away at our humanity. But the giant infected? They remained a looming, unseen threat. We heard tales, saw evidence. Whole towns flattened, not by bombs, but by sheer, brutal force. Mountain passes carved open, rivers diverted. The scope of their destruction was mind-boggling. It cemented the terrifying knowledge that when giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed. It wasn't just a fear. It was a grim reality. We were just delaying the inevitable. One afternoon, we stumbled upon a small, isolated research facility, nestled deep in the woods. It looked like a relic from a forgotten past, overgrown with vines, its perimeter fence long breached. But something about it called to me, a chance for answers, a chance to understand what we were fighting. "This is too risky," Mike said, his hand on his rifle. "Might be infected inside, or worse, what if there's something else being studied here?" "It's abandoned," I argued. "No power, no signs of life. But look at the satellite dishes, the labs. This could be where the answers are, where the cure could be." A desperate flicker of hope, however faint, was enough to push us forward. The thought of finding something to fight back against these evolved horrors, against the knowledge that humanity was doomed, was a powerful motivator. We spent a day clearing the facility. The main building was a maze of darkened corridors, overturned equipment, and forgotten secrets. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, old chemicals, and something vaguely sterile, like a hospital left to rot. We moved with agonizing slowness, our flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness, each shadow a potential threat. We found no infected, no survivors, just ghosts. In one lab, an overturned microscope, slides scattered across the floor. In another, a whiteboard covered in complex equations, theories about viral mutation, host adaptation, and something terrifyingly labeled growth factor X. Sarah, a medical student, understood more than I did. Her face grew paler with each new discovery. This is a bioresearch facility. They were studying the virus, trying to understand its mutation rates, its adaptive capabilities. "What about growth factor X?" I asked, pointing to the whiteboard. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "It looks like a theory, a hypothetical compound, something that could accelerate cellular growth, viral replication beyond anything natural, a sort of super catalyst for mutation." My blood ran cold. "You mean they were experimenting, trying to make it worse?" "Or trying to understand how it got worse," she corrected, but the fear in her eyes betrayed her. They were trying to understand how something could evolve so rapidly, how something could become giant. We found the deepest part of the facility in the sub-basement, a heavily reinforced vault-like section. The door was a massive blast-proof slab of steel, secured with multiple locks. Mike, with his ex-con skills, managed to pick it after an hour of painstaking effort. the clink of tumblers echoing ominously in the silent corridor. Inside, the air was colder, heavier. It was a single vast chamber filled with row after row of cryogenic tanks. Not for people, for samples, for experiments. And in the center of the room, on a reinforced plinth, sat a single, massive observation tank. It was empty, but the glass was scratched, gouged, and cracked from the inside. Whatever had been in there had gotten out. Sarah's gasp was audible. She pointed to a console nearby, its screen flickering to life as Mike managed to jury-rig a power source from a few scavenged batteries. Data streamed across the screen, complex biological markers, growth curves, genetic sequences, and a series of video logs. I clicked the first one. A man in a lab coat, his face haggard, appeared on the screen. His eyes were wide with a desperate manic energy. Log entry 173, he began, his voice raspy. Subject Delta, growth continues, unprecedented, exponential. The growth factor X, when introduced to the base viral strain, has achieved results beyond our wildest, most terrifying predictions. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes wide. Log entry 173, he began, his voice raspy. Subject Delta, growth continues, unprecedented, exponential. The growth factor X, when introduced to the base viral strain, has achieved results beyond our wildest, most terrifying predictions. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes wide.
It's not just growing larger, it's fusing, absorbing biomass, debris, even metal. We've seen it integrate rebar into its skeletal structure. It's a living, growing, sentient construct of infection and whatever it can consume. My stomach clenched. Sentient. That word echoed in my mind, a chilling pronouncement. Not just mindless beasts, something with awareness, something that thought, that planned. The scientist continued, a tremor in his voice. We believe Subject Delta is the genesis point, the original, perfected form of the evolved strain, the one that will propagate these mutations. The brutes, the runners, they're just smaller offshoots, less refined, less complete. He paused, looking around as if hearing something. Security breaches are constant. They're drawn to it. The smaller infected, they seek it out, like moths to a grotesque flame. The sheer amount of biomass it requires, the hunger, it's insatiable. His face flickered, static briefly obscuring the image. When it cleared, he was even more agitated. It's learning. It understands concepts, attack patterns, weaknesses. It can sense intent. This isn't just a zombie. This is an ecological event, a new apex predator, fundamentally reshaping the planet. The video log ended abruptly. My hands were shaking. Liam and Chloe were huddled behind Sarah, their faces pale, silently crying. Mike stood rigid, his rifle pointing aimlessly at the empty tank. "This is what we fought," I whispered, the words barely audible. "That brute, it was just a taste." Sarah scrolled through the other logs, more terrifying data. They were trying to contain it, to understand it, but it was too powerful, too fast. It broke free months ago. That's when the first reports started, the collapses, the disappearances. "So it's still out there," Mike said, his voice flat.
The Genesis point, the original giant. I looked at the empty tank, at the deep gouges in the reinforced glass, the immense, impossible scale of it. It dwarfed the brood I'd killed. If that thing was still out there, if it was indeed sentient, capable of absorbing and growing, then we truly stood no chance. It also says here, Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, her finger tracing a line on the screen, that the smaller infected, they serve it. They're drawn to it. They become its resources, its army, its extensions. My blood ran cold. An army, commanded by a sentient, giant zombie. This wasn't just a localized horror. This was a global takeover. A new chapter in the apocalypse. When giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed. The scientist's words, his terrified, final warning, now echoed with chilling prophecy. The implications of what we learned at the research facility were devastating.
Not only were there giant zombies, but they were evolving, led by a sentient, consuming entity. The thought paralyzed me with a fresh wave of terror. Our desperate fight for survival now felt utterly futile. It wasn't just about outrunning a horde. It was about evading a force of nature directed by a terrifying, intelligent will. "We have to warn people," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "If there are other survivors, they need to know." "Warn who, Sarah?" Mike's voice was hollow. "The military's gone. Government's collapsed. There's no one left to warn." "But if we can find a way to transmit this information," she pleaded, "a radio broadcast, anything. Maybe someone out there can use it, can find a weakness." I shook my head slowly. The scientist said it's adapting, it's absorbing. What weakness could it possibly have? "There always is one," she insisted, her eyes shining with desperate hope. "There has to be." Her words, though born of desperation, sparked a tiny ember in my own weary heart. I thought of my old man, a stubborn, tenacious bastard who never gave up, even when the odds were stacked against him. He'd taught me to fight, to endure, to always look for the loophole. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe there was a way. But first, we needed to get out of the facility. We were deep underground, potentially beneath the very territory of this subject delta. We had to assume it knew we were here. We were in its lair. The air was thick with the chilling realization that we were not alone. As we made our way back up the dark corridors, a faint, rhythmic thump reached our ears. Not from above this time, from outside. The entire facility seemed to subtly vibrate. A low, resonant hum, like a distant, massive engine. It was growing louder. "It's here," Mike whispered, his face pale. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Silent, move silent, back to the truck." We moved like ghosts, each step agonizingly slow and deliberate. The thumping grew louder, closer. It was definitely outside, circling the facility. The main entrance, the one we had used, felt like a trap. We needed another way out. I remembered seeing an old service tunnel, a ventilation shaft, on one of my initial scouting runs. Narrow, dusty, probably blocked, but it was our only shot. We scrambled through the upper levels, bypassing the main entrance, heading for the forgotten shaft. The sound of the giant outside was deafening now. A steady, rhythmic boom that shook the very foundations of the building. It wasn't just moving, it was searching.
and we were its prey. We reached the ventilation shaft. It was a tight squeeze, a claustrophobic crawl through rusted metal and thick dust. The twins went first, their small bodies easily navigating the narrow space. The sound of the giant outside was deafening now, a steady, rhythmic boom that shook the very foundations of the building. It wasn't just moving, it was searching, and we were its prey.
Sarah followed, then Mike, his larger frame struggling to pass through. I brought up the rear, my rifle dragging behind me, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Midway through, the building shuddered violently. A deafening crash erupted from above, followed by the sickening sound of concrete shearing and metal twisting. The main research lab, directly above us, was collapsing. The vibration shook the shaft, dislodging dust and debris, threatening to bury us alive. "Keep going," I yelled, my voice choked with dust. "Don't stop." We crawled faster, the air thick with fear and fallen debris. We could hear the distinct, wet squelch of something massive moving outside, directly above us. Its colossal weight was tearing the facility apart. It was trying to dig us out. We finally burst out into the late afternoon light, covered in dust and grime. We were in a dense patch of forest, away from the immediate perimeter of the facility. But the sight that greeted us stole my breath. The research facility was gone, reduced to a mountain of shattered concrete and twisted metal. And straddling the ruins, its immense, grotesque form rising against the bruised purple sky, was Subject Delta. It was bigger than I could have imagined, taller than the tallest building I'd ever seen, a grotesque monument to biological horror. Its body was a colossal patchwork of fused, rotting flesh, twisted rebar, chunks of concrete, and something that looked like scavenged steel plates, all pulsing with an internal, sickly green light. Multiple limbs, each as thick as a tree trunk, snaked from its torso. Its head, disproportionately small like the brute's, was a central mass of fused, dead eyes, all scanning, all searching. And from its distended maw, a low, constant moan emanated, a sound that seemed to absorb all other noise, echoing the despair of 1,000,000 lost souls. Around its feet, a vast, undulating carpet of smaller infected, shamblers and runners alike moved in eerie unison, drawn by its presence, serving its unspoken will. It was less an individual creature and more a living ecosystem of death, a true monstrosity, a force of nature, but a sentient one. It turned its massive composite head slowly, its dead eyes sweeping the forest. It could smell us. It knew we were here. "Run," I whispered, the word escaping my lips like a prayer. "Run, and don't look back." We fled, a desperate, silent dash through the dense undergrowth, the rhythmic thumping of Subject Delta's movements echoing through the trees behind us, a constant, chilling reminder that when giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed. We had glimpsed the true face of the apocalypse, and it was a horrifying, impossible scale of despair.
We were just ants, desperately scurrying away from an unstoppable god of rot and hunger, and it was coming for us. We ran for hours, driven by the primal fear of that colossal entity, that living mountain of death. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, every branch a snare, every rustle a pursuing shadow. My lungs burned, my legs screamed,
But I couldn't stop. None of us could. The image of Subject Delta, its grotesque form blotting out the sky, was seared into my mind, a nightmarish beacon of absolute despair. The sheer scale of it was almost comedic in its horror. We were fighting against something that could literally reshape the landscape, consume entire ecosystems. What hope did humanity have against such an adversary? The scientist's words echoed in my mind. A new apex predator, fundamentally reshaping the planet. He wasn't wrong. He was tragically, terrifyingly right. We finally collapsed in a hollow, deep within a thicket of thorns, far from the shattered remains of the research facility. Night had fallen, a moonless void that offered only a false sense of security. Our ragged breaths were the only sounds, punctuated by the occasional distant moan of an ordinary infected, a sound that now seemed almost comforting compared to the unimaginable horror we'd left behind. "What do we do now?" Liam whispered, his voice hoarse, raw with terror. Chloe was openly sobbing, clinging to Sarah. "We survive," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "That's all we can do." Sarah, ever practical, tried to rally us. "We found valuable information. We know what we're up against. That's a start." "A start to what?" Mike snapped, his usual calm demeanor shattered. "To finding a bigger crowbar? This thing is unstoppable, Sarah. It's the end. We saw it. This is what happens when giant zombies evolve. Humanity is doomed." His voice cracked, filled with the raw, visceral terror we all felt but rarely dared to voice. His outburst hung in the air, a stark, undeniable truth. We were doomed. Every fiber of my being screamed that it was true. This wasn't a fight we could win. We were just prolonging the inevitable. The sheer size, the intelligence, the ability to absorb and evolve, it was insurmountable. But then a memory flashed in my mind. My old man, after a particularly bad fall during a climb, his leg broken, freezing, lost in the mountains. "Never quit, son," he'd wheezed, his face pale, but his eyes burning with defiance. "There's always a way out, always to keep moving forward, even if it's just one step at a time." "He's right," I said, my voice gaining strength, surprising even myself. "The doom is real. But we're not doomed. Not yet. Not while we're breathing." Mike looked at me, a flicker of something in his eyes.
"What are you saying, Alex? That we go back there? That we try to fight that thing?" "No," I replied, shaking my head. "We don't fight it. We can't. But we learn from it. We avoid it. And we try to warn others. We find a way to transmit that data, to give humanity, what's left of it, a fighting chance to understand what's coming for 'em. Maybe, just maybe, someone out there can decipher it, find an actual weakness, find a solution, or at least find a way to exist alongside it, to avoid it, to survive it." It was a desperate hope, a fragile thread woven from fear and stubborn refusal to yield. But it was a thread nonetheless, a reason to keep going, a reason to face another dawn. The weight of the world, the knowledge of Subject Delta, its terrifying evolution, pressed down on us. The silence of the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for our decision. The next few weeks were a brutal test of our resolve. We were constantly on the move,
scavenging for food, water, and fuel. Subject Delta, or at least its destructive path, seemed to be moving west towards the heart of the continent. We tried to stay ahead of it, a desperate game of cat and mouse with a creature that moved mountains. The sheer emptiness of the landscape was profound. The world felt hollowed out, a stage for a silent, endless play of decay and pursuit. We encountered smaller hordes, the occasional brute, which we now understood were just fragments, echoes of the original horror. We learned to avoid them, to use stealth and cunning rather than direct confrontation. My knowledge of abandoned spaces, of urban exploration, became invaluable. We moved through ghost towns, industrial ruins, always hugging the shadows, always listening. Sarah, driven by a fierce determination, spent every spare moment with the salvaged laptop and portable satellite dish we'd found at the research facility. She was trying to send the data, the video logs, the terrifying scientific findings out into the ether. But the signal was weak, unreliable. The global communication networks had largely collapsed. It was a message in a bottle, cast into a cosmic ocean. Mike, meanwhile, grew increasingly withdrawn, his eyes haunted. He'd seen the face of ultimate doom, and it had broken something inside him. He still performed his duties, still drove, still stood watch, but the light had gone out of his eyes. He moved like a ghost, a living testament to the crushing weight of despair. The twins, Liam and Chloe, found solace in each other, clinging to a fragile innocence that was constantly under assault. Liam, the more resilient, had started to try and help Sarah with the tech, picking up bits and pieces of the complex data.
Chloe, however, often sat in silent tears, staring at the empty landscape, lost in her own private world of grief and fear. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and purple, we were camped in the ruins of an old highway motel. The wind whistled through the broken windows, carrying the distant, familiar moan of the infected. We'd scavenged a few cans of food, a meager meal that did little to soothe our gnawing hunger. Sarah finally looked up from the laptop, her face pale, but her eyes alight with a faint spark of triumph. "I got something, a signal, a repeating broadcast originating from the Pacific Northwest, a research outpost, still active." Hope, sharp and sudden, pierced the pervasive gloom. "Are they survivors, scientists?" I asked, my voice tight with excitement. "Looks like it," she replied, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "They're broadcasting a distress signal, but also a call for data, for information on the advanced infected. They've seen evidence of it, but they don't understand the scale, not like we do." Mike, for the first time in weeks, looked up, a flicker of something resembling hope in his eyes. "So there are others, still fighting?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "And they're asking for any information on the alpha strain. That's what they're calling the giant ones. They need to understand how giant zombies evolve." My mind raced. This was it. Our chance. A chance to contribute, to perhaps save something, to give our endless flight purpose. "Can you send the data?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded, her fingers poised over the keyboard. "I've encrypted it. It's a huge file. It'll take time, if the signal holds." "Do it," I commanded. "Send everything, all of it. They need to know the truth. They need to know what's really out there, what we're truly up against." As Sarah initiated the transfer, a profound sense of purpose settled over me. We were no longer just running, we were fighting back in our own desperate, small way. We were sending a message from the heart of the storm, a warning, a desperate plea, a last gasp of defiance in the face of absolute, horrifying doom. But as the data streamed, the wind outside picked up, rattling the broken windows, and a new sound began to filter through the night. A low, rhythmic thump, faint at first, then growing stronger. The ground trembled, the motel shuddered. The despair returned, cold and sharp. The thumping grew louder, closer. It wasn't the distant rumble of a passing threat. It was a deliberate, methodical approach. My blood ran cold. It was like the research facility all over again. But this time, there was no secret tunnel, no pre-planned escape route. We were exposed, trapped in a flimsy motel, our beacon of hope suddenly overshadowed by the looming specter of our ultimate nightmare. "It's close," Mike whispered, his hand going to his rifle. His eyes, though still haunted, held a flicker of grim determination. Too close. Sarah's face was pale, her fingers flying across the laptop, the progress bar for the data transfer painfully slow. "The signal's weakening, it's fluctuating." "Liam, Chloe, get in the truck," I ordered, my voice tight. "Mike, with me. Sarah, keep sending. If that signal holds, it's our only chance." The ground beneath us vibrated, rattling the broken glass in the windows. Dust rained down from the ceiling. A section of the motel wall groaned, plaster cracking. This wasn't just a brute. This was something far, far bigger. This was it. I rushed to the window, peering out into the moonless night. The darkness was absolute, but I could feel its presence, a suffocating aura of decay and immense power. Then a massive shadow detached itself from the gloom. It was Subject Delta. Its colossal form, a moving mountain of fused flesh and concrete, was less than a mile away, lumbering directly towards us. The sheer size of it was breathtaking, terrifying. The very air grew cold in its presence. Its composite head, that cluster of dead eyes, swiveled slowly, scanning the ruins. It wasn't just attracted to us, it was hunting us. It was as if it knew we had gleaned its secrets, tried to warn others. We were a thorn in its side, an irritating anomaly in its expanding reign of horror. "It's coming!" Mike yelled, his rifle up, aiming at the distant, impossible shape. His hands were shaking. "It's too big, Mike! We can't fight it!" I grabbed his arm. "We have to run. Sarah, are you done?" Her fingers trembled over the keyboard. "Almost. 10% left. It's too important, Alex. They need to know how giant zombies evolve." The building shuddered again, violently this time. A nearby section of the motel facade simply crumbled, falling to the ground in a shower of debris. The wall of Subject Delta's immense body was now visible against the faint starlight, a dark, undulating silhouette against the sky. Its constant, low moan vibrated through the ground, a dirge for a dying world. Liam and Chloe were already in the truck, huddled together, their faces lit by the dashboard lights. Their small, terrified eyes watched us from the relative safety of the vehicle. 5%, Alex! The signal's holding, barely! Sarah cried out, her voice cracking. I made a snap decision, the kind that rips your soul apart.
Mike, get the truck ready. If the transfer finishes, we go. If not, we leave her." The words were like ash in my mouth. Leave Sarah? The one who had given us hope.
The one who believed in a future. Mike stared at me, his eyes wide with horror and a dawning understanding. He knew I was right. There was no other choice. One life for 4, the calculus of the apocalypse. "I can't, Alex." "You have to," I roared, pushing him towards the door. "Go, now! Get the kids out of here!" He hesitated, then, with a defeated sigh, turned and ran for the truck. I watched him go, a pang of guilt, raw and agonizing, twisting in my gut. What would my old man say? What would I have said before the world broke, before the choices became this impossible? This was the true damnation, not just the death, but the absolute erosion of what made us human. 2%! Sarah screamed, her voice shrill with desperation. "Come on! Hold! Signal! Hold!" The colossal form of Subject Delta was now upon us. Its massive shadow engulfed the motel, plunging us into an eerie, suffocating darkness. I could hear the grinding of concrete, the tearing of metal as its immense body pushed through the remaining structures around us. Its putrid breath, a sickening mix of decay and something metallic, filled the air. I could see its massive foot, easily the size of a school bus, rising into the air, about to come down directly on the motel. There was no escape. Not for us. 1%! Sarah yelled, tears streaming down her face. It's done! Alex, it's done! A small, triumphant beep sounded from the laptop, confirming the transfer was complete. The data, the truth about Subject Delta, the horrifying knowledge of its evolution was out there. A small flicker of hope, a desperate message to a dying world. "Run, Sarah!" I screamed, grabbing her arm, dragging her away from the table. "Get to the truck! Go!" She scrambled, clutching the laptop, running for the door, her small figure dwarfed by the approaching monster. I turned, my rifle up, aiming at the monstrous foot descending upon us. A futile gesture, a last act of defiance. My hands were shaking, my eyes burning. This was it. When giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed. And I was about to become the last definitive proof. The ground erupted as Subject Delta's foot slammed down, the force of the impact sending a massive shockwave through the air. The motel exploded into a shower of concrete, metal, and dust. I was thrown clear, a searing pain tearing through my side, my head slamming against something hard. Darkness. Then ringing silence. Consciousness returned in painful, disjointed flashes. The world was a dizzying blur of pain and disorientation. My head throbbed, a dull ache that eclipsed all other sensations. My ears rang with an incessant high-pitched whine, and the metallic tang of blood filled my mouth. I tried to move, but my body protested, screaming with agony. I was lying in the dirt, surrounded by the shattered remains of the motel. Twisted rebar, pulverized concrete, scattered pieces of furniture, a landscape of utter destruction. The air was thick with dust and the acrid stench of decay, a familiar perfume of the apocalypse. Above me, the sky was a bruised purple, the first faint hint of dawn painting the horizon. My eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus. Sarah, Mike, Liam, Chloe, where were they? Panic
cold and sharp, cut through the pain. Had I failed? Had we all been consumed? Then I saw it. The truck. It was battered, dented, but still largely intact, a short distance away. And around it, 3 figures, silhouetted against the nascent light. They were moving. They were alive. Sarah, Mike, and the twins. They had made it. They had escaped. A wave of relief, so profound it almost made me weep, washed over me. I had been seconds too slow, a hair's breadth from becoming a flattened stain beneath Subject Delta's immense foot. But they had survived. My last desperate act of defiance had given them a chance. The data was sent. They were safe. For now. I pushed myself up, groaning, every muscle screaming in protest. My right leg, twisted at an unnatural angle beneath a chunk of fallen rebar, screamed with a pain so intense it almost drowned out the approaching horror. No, that was the beginning. This was the present, the echo of the intro, the circle completing. My entire left side ached with a dull, persistent throb. I felt a sharp, cold pain in my side. I reached down, my fingers coming away slick with blood. A large piece of jagged rebar, a gruesome souvenir from the exploding motel, was impaled in my left flank. It wasn't deep enough to be immediately fatal, but it was bad, very bad. The truck, now fully visible in the dim light, was slowly backing away, turning to face the open highway. Mike was driving, his head turned, frantically searching the devastation for me. Sarah was in the passenger seat, the laptop clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with fear and desperate hope. The twins were huddled in the back, silent, terrified. They saw me. Mike slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching. Sarah screamed my name. "Alex! Alex!" He started to reverse, to come back for me. My heart ached. They were coming back for me. But then, from behind the shattered remnants of the motel, a new sound began. A low, resonant hum. A grinding of rock and metal. Subject Delta. It was moving. It was still there, still searching, still consuming. It rose, a colossal silhouette against the dawn, its multiple limbs tearing at the earth, preparing to move. Its central cluster of dead eyes sweeping the landscape. It would see the truck.
It would see me. It would come. I knew what I had to do. The choice was agonizing, but clear. I was wounded, bleeding, a liability. One dead man against 4 living, hoping souls. The data was sent. Their survival was paramount. I waved them off, a frantic, desperate gesture, shaking my head. "Go! Go! Don't stop! Go!" My voice was hoarse, raw, barely a whisper. Mike hesitated, his eyes locked on mine, a silent plea. Sarah was crying, screaming my name again. But then she saw Subject Delta, its immense form slowly turning, its many eyes focusing. The choice was made. Mike slammed the gas pedal, and the truck lurched forward, accelerating onto the highway, leaving me behind. I watched them go, a single tear tracing a clean path through the grime on my cheek. It was a choice born of despair, but also of love, of a desperate, final hope for humanity. They had the data. They had the future. My future was here. Subject Delta's monstrous form was now fully revealed in the pale light of dawn, its grotesque body casting a long, ominous shadow. Its vast composite head turned, those dead eyes locking on to me.
The data was sent. Mike slammed the gas pedal, and the truck lurched forward, accelerating onto the highway, leaving me behind. I watched them go, a single tear tracing a clean path through the grime on my cheek. It was a choice born of despair, but also of love, of a desperate, final hope for humanity. They had the data. They had the future. My future was here. Subject Delta's monstrous form was now fully revealed in the pale light of dawn, its grotesque body casting a long, ominous shadow. Its vast composite head turned, those dead eyes locking on to me. It let out a low, guttural growl, a sound of triumph, of hunger, of pure, unthinking malice. It began to lumber towards me, its immense weight making the ground tremble. I lay there, impaled, broken, but alive. My pistol, my last desperate hope, was just out of reach, caught beneath a piece of shattered concrete. My vision was blurring, the edges of the world fading to black. I could hear its footsteps, rhythmic, terrifying, growing louder with each passing second. The final, crushing realization settled over me. This was how it ended. The end of my story. The end of hope. The ultimate, horrifying conclusion that, when giant zombies evolve, humanity is doomed. But as its colossal shadow fell over me, as its putrid breath filled my dying lungs, a single, defiant thought echoed in my mind. They had the data. They knew. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Maybe, somewhere, somehow, humanity would find a way. My purpose was fulfilled. I had bought them time. My time was up. The immense foot, a mountain of decaying flesh and twisted metal, rose into the sky, blotting out the nascent sun, preparing to descend. I closed my eyes, a faint, defiant smile on my lips. My last thought was of the green fields, the blue sky, the world that was, and the desperate hope for the world that might be, if they survived, if humanity survived. The ground began to shake, not with the distant rumble, but with the immediate, crushing impact of untold tons of flesh and concrete. The air rushed out of my lungs. Darkness. But then a new sound, a faint, distant thrum from the sky. Something else was coming, something huge.
And it was heading straight for Subject Delta. What new nightmare had arrived? And what did it mean for the last desperate hope of humanity?